People were saying blockchain, that's pretty much only for drug dealers and money launderers. Are you sure you don't want to, you want to go to jail, man? Like, and I think if you ask a lot of people in Web3 gaming, like, what does it mean? They're like, but you can own your stuff. You're like, but what does that mean? And you keep pressing them on it, they will eventually break down to a point where it's just like, well, you can sell it. They see a lot of grift and they see a lot of greed. So why are you guys tainting our games with that crap? And they're right? And I see that and I'm like, I know, it's disgusting. We hate it too. And they're like, and why are you building in this space then? You know, and because I want to show that there's a light side, like that there's a new experience around ownership that you can really light up, and just not enough people are talking about it, in my opinion. I have a guitar pick. There's a little P on the corner, and I could show it to you, and you'd be like, cool guitar pick, bro. And I'm like, wait a minute. See that little P? Yeah. Well, that's the logo for this band in the United States. Their last concert, I was there, and I listened to their last song, and at the end, he flicks his guitar pick out, and I got it. It looks like a normal guitar pick, but it's actually got all that emotional connection, right? This is what we need in our digital items. You need more than the price provenance of who paid what for the item. We need digital items with stories, and you can't just tell the story. You need the items to tell the story. These are going to be the next wave of video game experiences, and nobody's ready for it.
Welcome back, everybody, to another episode of Press Play here, brought to you by Games GG. I'm the host, George, and we are joined today by Kevin. Hello, Kevin.
Hello. Great to be here. Thanks so much for having me.
Lovely for you to join us today. So what we'll do first is we'll find out a little bit about who you are and what you are doing in the space currently, in case people somehow don't know who you are. So a little bit who you are and what you're doing right now.
Well, let's see. So, yep, I'm Kevin Lambert. I have been designing games for almost 30 years now, starting to feel a little old, I'm not going to lie. So depending how long, if any of you guys play games, you may have played some of the games I worked on. I started out at a studio called Monolith back in 1996, working on games like No One Lives Forever, or Tron 2.0, Grunts Insanity. That was a lot of fun, and Blood. And then moved into, and I was a programmer at that time, believe it or not, because I've always wanted to do game design and user experience design. I knew that ever since I was a kid, but they didn't have any schools to do that when I was growing up. They do now, they have plenty of them, but I had to go a different route. And my parents had always said, you know, we don't really understand that games passion of yours. And just in case it doesn't work out, can you get a skill set that we understand? And I was a bit of a computer geek as well. And I was like, well, what about a computer programmer? And they said, great, you know, you could work at a bank. If it fails you, that's fine. But that didn't happen. So I got the programming degree purely as a means to an end to get into game design, which I was able to do after about 5 years full-time. My first full-time game design job was as the lead designer of an RPG called Dungeon Siege 2, back on the PC at Gas Powered Games. That game did really well and was a lot of fun. Since then, I started my own studio. It got acquired by Activision and branded Sierra Online, if you remember the name of that studio way back when. I worked there. Then got into casual games, and then rounded out my Web 2 career at the Microsoft Casual Game Studio, reinventing and redesigning the new Microsoft Solitaire and Microsoft Minesweeper and Mahjong and the classic games that used to come with Windows, the big time wasters. Finally adding revenue to those and retention, and made them kind of cool. And that was awesome because we got 1 billion players, we made 9 figures in revenue, and one of our games, the Solitaire game, made the World Video Game Hall of Fame in 2019. So that was awesome, and I doubt I will ever top that in my career, but it's all cool. So to fast forward through my Web 2, and then I got into Web 3 in 2017 because I got really excited about the intersection between blockchain and gaming. And this was at a time when people were saying blockchain, that's pretty much only for drug dealers and money launderers. Are you sure you don't want to, you want to go to jail, man? Like, so it was really frustrating because I saw but the future of gaming and the intersection and digital property ownership and new monetization models that you couldn't have before. And I got really excited, but I got really frustrated because nobody in traditional gaming wanted to hear about it. So in 2017, I just started poking around in Web3, fully knowing that my next career move was going to be a blockchain game or game studio.
Yeah.
And it took several years. You know, people were saying like, "Oh, you like blockchain games? You should check out CryptoKitties. It's awesome." And I'm like, CryptoKitties? I mean, I don't know if you were around in that time, but it was like, this isn't really a
Yeah.
game, but it's kind of neat. It's neat technology. And then in 2020, they were like, the blockchain games, you should check out Axie Infinity. And I'm like, okay, now that is more like a game, although it looks like a game that was made by finance and marketing people, but it's cool. Like it's good. It's good. And it cracked open the door and everybody got excited about, oh, you can do things with blockchain games. Although nobody was really going after like the experience of ownership of digital property in the way that
Mm.
that I got excited by. So fast forward another, what was that, 2 years in 2021, I started talking to everybody who was advertising, you know, an NFT or a blockchain game. We're going to have an MMO in 3 months.
Yeah.
You should buy our NFT. And I'm thinking, sure you are. But, you know, I was talking to every CEO and I was in every Discord minting every NFT at that time just to try to make a connection. Somebody who shared like a vision that I had. Couldn't find anybody until I ran into Tim, our CEO at Koin Games, who had just minted a project in September 2021 called the Koin Games Developer Squad, KGDS. And you know, everybody's promising games in 3 months, and it's going to be awesome and beautiful. You know, trailers that may never come to fruition. And Tim's promise at that time was like, hey, we just want to build a game together with you guys, the community, and we don't even have the game team yet. Like, we're going to find them. And so if you want to join us on that journey, you know, buy these NFTs. Like, I wasn't even part of the studio then. It was just like Tim, an artist and a developer, with a very low bar for a promise at that time. So it was refreshing because everybody else is promising the moon and everything. So I met with Tim and he said, hey, we're looking for, you know, a game developer. And I was thinking, do you want someone on your executive leadership team who really cares about the user experience and wants to balance that with any revenue opportunity we might be, you know, have in front of us? Because that's what I had grown accustomed to in my 12 years in Microsoft, co-founding that studio with a business guy. Like, I'm user experience DNA and he was business DNA, and together that makes a really good combination. And so I said, do you want that, you know, on your co-founding team? And he said, not only do I want one of you, I want three of you. Do you know any other guys that are like that? And I'm like, okay, I think we're going to get along great. This is cool. So we started out on our journey, and now we're building a game that you may have seen some musings of because we've teased it a little bit. We're making a TCG. It's called Project O. That's an O, the letter O, not zero. And that's not the actual name of the game, but until we get our trademark, the O is relevant, but you might actually be able to figure it out. But it's Project O until we get the trademark finalized, and then we'll release the real name of the game. And so, yeah, I'm really here to show, you know, a lot of people in especially in traditional games look down on Web3 gaming and blockchain gaming, and they see a lot of grift and they see a lot of greed, and they're like, I don't like what I see when I look over there. It's kind of dirty, and you know, we as traditional gamers have been playing games for decades without any expectation of value. So why are you guys tainting our games with that crap, right? And they're right? And I see that and I'm like, I know, it's disgusting. We hate it too. And they're like, you do? That's so weird. Like, why aren't you fighting me right now? And why are you building in this space then? You know, and I'm like, because I want to show that there's a light side, like that there's a new experience around ownership that you can really light up, and just not enough people are talking about it, in my opinion. I think some people now are starting to talk about it, but it's just been programmers and business dev and finance people building games, and like, where are the actual product people, the people who know how to make great
Mm.
games? They know how to, attract large audiences. They know how to be around for 15 years. Like, where are those people? There just aren't enough of those people building. And if they are, like, they don't understand the culture of Web3 because they just got here
Mm.
yesterday or something. So, we're in this interesting
Yeah.
place where several of us on the leadership team are Web3 degens. We've minted hundreds or thousands of NFTs. Our bags are down bad, like, rip our portfolios. But we also, we know how to reach the gaming audience who, like, the game has to be good. Okay, we know how to do that. And we also, know how to excite Web3 because we are Web3 native ourselves. So that's what we're aiming to
Yeah.
do with our game. And you've seen the trailer, and we're off to the races. Our next milestone will be alpha later this year.
That's fantastic, man. It's such an impressive history you have as well. And even without the homework I've done on the side, I know a lot of people watch me do these kind of things and believe I do no research. I do actually do some research sometimes with the help of the lovely Eliza. But even you just naming games, so you mentioned Monolith with Blood. I actually watched yesterday a review of Blood Fresh Supply. You remember when they made the new version from the same
Yes.
line, right? That was also from Monolith, yeah. And then you mentioned Sierra, which started as online studios. They're the ones that put out King's Quest and
Back
all
in the
the
day.
point and click adventures. Yeah, yeah. I may look youthful to all the viewers out there, but I am 37. So I do remember playing these type of games. And I think I actually watched all of the King's Quest playthroughs 4 months ago. I watched a guy play every single one of them, 100% completed them. So there's still games that I watch and look at now. So to think that that's the kind of area you started in and the progression you went through to end up as a giant like Microsoft before deciding to then come through into Web3 as well. It's such an interesting journey. I kind of want to touch on something you said towards the start, that you kind of got into gaming through the idea that you needed to have a skill, and that skill was programming. What really brought you the draw to gaming? Because not to be offensive, but I believe you may be slightly older than me, but even when I was a child, gaming really didn't seem like a career path at all. It just was something that happened to be, and all of your older relatives would call everything a Nintendo. So anyone having any sort of desire to get into that industry kind of would get stifled, even when I was a kid. So I could imagine it might have been even harder when you were. So what really was making you think that's what I want to get into?
Well, I got really lucky. You ever seen that diagram of, like, your purpose, which is like, what can you be paid for? What does the world need? What are you good at? And
Yeah.
shoot, I can't remember the fourth one. But when you find, if you can find a combination or at least 3 out of the 4 of those, you're really getting close. And if you find 4 out of the 4, it's like, this is what you were put on this earth to do. And I got
Yeah.
lucky and discovered that in my early childhood years. It was in the 70s. I'm going to date myself pretty bad here. But, like, I went on a school field trip. I think it was probably in first grade or around there, to a roller skating rink.
Mm.
Like, this is Stranger Things 80s time frame. And
Yeah.
and in the roller skating rinks, you would just go skate around the rink, and then you take a break and you get some snacks. And they had a they had an arcade, and they had mostly
Mm.
pinball machines. But the first video games around that time were like Space Invaders and Pac-Man. And I
Yeah.
was
Yeah.
just, the kids are around the rink, and I'm just like, oh, the clouds are coming down, and I'm like, how do I do this? Like, what? And my parents had no idea, and nobody else had. You have to know somebody who knows somebody, and good
Mm.
luck. And
Yeah.
I'm just like, I just want to do that. I want to make these. So I decided then that that's what I wanted to do, and it's been a giant quest ever since then. And I got my first gaming job right outside of college, and I was like, I can't believe, huge imposter syndrome. Like, they're gonna fire me any day they realize that I have no idea what I'm doing. And then it's gone from there. Yeah. So I just found, I knew I got really lucky, and it was after seeing the video games in the roller skating rink that it just snapped instantly for me.
That's a wild story, and it's like I think it's kind of hard for some of the younger people now to comprehend because they grew up with gaming being such something that was such accepted and just like widely accessible to really not understand that at some point it's a game or play a video game you had to go to a completely separate building from your house to find this big
Yeah,
machine that you're going
yeah.
to play on, and then it did slowly come into some of the earlier consoles they put out. I think the first one I was ever on was a Sega Genesis, but I think we were about 10 years old, 11-year old, when me and Gaspode bullied our parents into buying the first PC, because from a young age we kind of gravitated more towards PC gaming than the console style of games that we had out there. But saying you went straight from school into your first job, what platform were you developing for at that time?
It was PC. The very first product I ever worked on was called the Windows 95 Game Sampler CD. And this was at a time when there were still some people who weren't sure if Windows, the operating system, was going to make it, or if it was because to really get at the computer and get down there
Hmm.
at the hardware level, you don't want this Windows thing on top of it. It's got to be DOS. That's super dated. Like a lot of people don't even know what that is. But like, and so I was just like, yeah, but Windows is so convenient. Like games are all going to move on there, and
Hmm.
before I got my first job, I made a little game in Windows, like a little board game, and that's what I brought with me to my
Hmm.
interview. And they're like, "You made a game?" And I'm like, "Yeah, it's not
Yeah.
multiplayer, but it's got some animations." And they were like, "Let's go get some food." Like the interview was so easy, I think, because I was one of the few
Yeah.
people who had done that.
Turned up with a
Yeah,
product ready and they're like, okay, can actually build something. That's fantastic. So you've kind of seen the whole journey from arcade machines into the gaming area we are now. With the places you started at and moved into, so you say you were working on like with Monolith on Blood, and then you did with the online, they were kind of the Click one. What kind of moved you towards the casual side when you went over to Microsoft? Because I could be categorizing the prior games incorrectly, but I don't think they were really as casual as some of the ones we saw you do at Microsoft. So, what kind of made you, I wouldn't say
yeah,
pivot, just grow into
sure.
casual opposed to where
I
you
think it was
started?
mostly intrigue. Like I had worked on hardcore games, bloody games, shooters, adventure games, RPGs, and I had a couple of friends who I used to work with at Monolith that got into casual games way before I did, like before they were cool, before you would ever say casual games and not laugh, or and before, yeah, which now they're like, yeah, casual games. But back then it was really odd, and they were like, yeah, casual games, and I'm like, what is how do you make, is that like making games for grandma? Like what even is that? And it felt like it was this one area of video games that I just totally didn't understand. And I had the opportunity before Microsoft to work at a big casual games company called Big Fish Games. They were one of the biggest casual game studios
Yeah.
in the world. I'm like, I'm gonna go check out this whole games for grandma thing and see what it's all about. And it was amazing. Like these people, these older, 45 and up females is kind of the primary demographic. Like there are males who play, but that was like the core demographic. Whereas, traditional games is like male 18 to 35. So these
Yeah.
slightly older ladies, your aunts, your moms, your grandmas were playing these games, and there's nothing at all casual about the way they play. They're like retired. They play all day. They would put like your grandson to shame, like they just play them all day. It's insane. And they love to play. They play with such passion. And I'm like, they just like shorter sessions. They like games that are a little quicker and maybe a little easier to learn, but they will play them for 8 hours straight. It's insane. And and those games are like they need to be quick, and they need to be, most of them are free, like to download at least. And they have to be so amazingly polished. Like I like to call this juiciness. Like it's when a game really has high production value and it's got all kinds of eye candy and things that you're just like, wow, look at all this
Yeah.
stuff. And all the casual games had to have that because the space was so competitive that you would just be like, yeah, next, I'm going to try another one. And you're, wow, this one's pretty. Okay, I'll play this. So you had to have that. And I'm like, I love that so much because I've always fought for like high quality and a great user experience. And in
Yeah.
traditional games, that's like that's a priority 3 feature you're asking for. It's nice, and maybe we have time for it. Spoiler alert, you never have time for it. And but in casual games, you had to put that butter in, or you'd lose
Yeah.
you lose to the competition. So I'm like, man, if I ever get back into traditional games again, I'm bringing that juice with me, and we'll just do smaller. We'll do fewer things better, because of that. So that's been
Yeah.
my mission since then.
I do like that idea. One of the main people I watch that does game reviews, he talks about how there's such a game genre now as the Ubisoft sandbox, which is just a different reskin over every single one, and they throw every single possible game loop they can do into this map and say, play it your way. How about just design a game that I'm meant to play the way you want me to play it? Make me have fun the way you want me to have fun. So it's a great thing to hear that that's what made you move over into that sector, is the idea of like making sure the small amount of stuff that is there is just made really well and has that juiciness, as you put it, towards there. A question I'll ask you then, as you're one of the people that has been doing gaming for so long, compared to some people in our industry. Not necessarily saying that is a negative against them. Some people come straight into this and they're great at doing the game straight away, but it means you've seen the history and the legacy go through as it's grown over. So someone that had an eye for casual games and moved into the casual gaming sector. What were your opinions when mobiles started to throw their hat into the ring against consoles and PCs, which were the only two really battling it out for games at their time, until mobiles came along, first with Snake, and then when we slowly got the PDAs and then into what we now know as the smartphones, those type of gamings coming in. Did you think there would be as like huge as we see they are now, or did you kind of have some of the same worries that I remember when mobiles started trying to be gaming devices as well? I had a worry that was like, why would I ever play on my phone when I can play something that looks better on my PC? Or as someone that was in casual, did you think mobiles always with you, perfect fit?
Well, it's really interesting. So I was there for the rise of mobile games and the free-to-play business model. And you know what's really funny is that there's a big correlation between what happened then in mobile and what's happening now in Web3 and blockchain gaming. Because there were like staunch purists, game developer purists, who would say
Yep.
free-to-play mobile, like that'll never work. Never. It's like, here's why. A, you got crappy quality games. B, that'll never be as good as a boxed game. B,
Yep.
you've got these predatory monetization because it's the only way to make that work. And they were just like, it'll never fly. Like, just stop working on mobile. And you hear the same. It's a rhyme with what you see in Web3. Like,
Hmm.
oh, you've got all this grift and this greed. The quality of the games suck today. They'll never be as good as a traditional AAA or AA game. And that's coming, right? Just the way it came to mobile. Like, and look at them now. Like, you've got great mobile
Yeah.
games. Free to play is awesome. There are immersive experiences. You got games like Genshin Impact. The games have come a long way. They don't have to be predatory. There still are some predatory monetization models, right?
Yeah.
But you balance that with the light side. So I don't know. I always knew that mobile gaming would work, but because of the size of the screen and the input, like, you're in a different mindset than you are. Like, let's compare that to a console game, right? A console game, like, the picture of that is you're on your couch in your living room with your Cheetos and your controller and your boys or whatever, right? And you're really there for an immersive experience. Like, take me away into
Hmm.
this world where I can do some cool stuff. And on mobile, it's different. It's not take me away. Like, it's not the same thing. You're there for a different kind of experience, unless you cast it to your screen or something, right? And so, those types of games were always going to be great. They're not going to replace consoles in that way. I didn't think they would, but I knew the games would get better. I knew the monetization models would be fine, and the quality of the games were going to be great eventually, and the speed of the games would be fine. So yeah, I wasn't worried that mobile wasn't going to take off, but I wasn't necessarily quick to be like, that's where I wasn't an entrepreneur at that time, right? So I wasn't like, that's the
Yeah.
next generation. Like, I see that in blockchain gaming. I'm like, these are going to be the next wave of video game experiences, and nobody's ready for it. Um, yeah.
I think one of the things you kind of touched on towards the end there is the idea that when there was the PC versus the console, the idea was that they were actually battling against each other because they had a similar sort of immersion, a similar sort of experience. Whereas mobile, I like to your point is like it never really was competing against these two because it was a completely separate thing from it. And I think a lot of people at that time didn't realize this either. And I think with Web3, you see some of the naysayers on the outside in traditional gaming that are kind of thinking it in the same way of consoles and PCs versus mobiles, thinking that they're going to be trying to take away from them rather than an addition and a different user experience you're just allowing the player to have. So I can completely agree that this could be what's coming next and happen to mobile. Unfortunately, none of us are clairvoyant enough to be able to put our money on it and say this is definitely what's going to be happening. But I've been doing this now for over 3 years, the gaming side of Web3. I do remember CryptoKitties. It's funny you mentioned that as well. My previous guest, that wasn't Omar, also got into Web3 through
Yeah.
CryptoKitties as well. So maybe there's quite a few of us out there that need to give our hand to CryptoKitties. Myself, I will show that I am slightly younger in the crypto space. It was actually Axie that got me into
There you go.
Web3. I remember watching, I believe it was Spam and Rice is the person I remember the
That's
most.
still that's
But
still
it was actually
OG as far as Web3 gaming is concerned. It's you're still cool that way, you know?
the fact that when I started making content in Web3, most of them were just DeFi protocols with some sort of interface laid over the front of it, and now I'm playing an actual game, does make me feel I have grown enough in the space to be an OG as well. So, my question would be like, so you saw CryptoKitties, this was one of the first ones you saw, not speak negatively of the project or anything like that, but when you saw that, I would assume you had a similar sort of thought process I did. I've not never been involved in games as you have. I've recently, throughout my time here, I've taken up some Unity program and Unreal program just so if I'm critiquing a game, I can understand. Oh, they built this way because like you can't build it the other way, right? This is how it has to be. When you saw CryptoKitties, did you think, I hope this isn't what we're stuck with, or did you kind of feel like more of a hopeful excitement sentiment about it that you're thinking, if this is all that's here now, 3 years time, we could have something massive that is the same as what we have in the
It was
traditional form.
total excitement. No, I was there. There was no concern that this is. Have we topped? Are we at the top of the cycle here? No, no.
Have we
Yeah,
peaked
it definitely
already?
wasn't that because it's just like it's a nascent technology and people are banging around and trying new stuff. And that's how I saw it. These are devs. Like the first people into blockchain were all developers, and like they're not game makers. They're not even product. A lot of them aren't even product people. They're programmers, right? And I have that
Yeah.
DNA in me, so I know. You're just like, let me just break stuff and look what I did. Look what I did. Right? It's not pretty, but it's okay, right? So that's just not what they're great at. And so that CryptoKitties, right? You're like, okay, nice proof of technology, nice proof of concept. It got me really excited about digital ownership. The experience wasn't amazing, but it really made me think about experiences that could be amazing around digital ownership. Yeah.
So a lot of people use the term digital ownership in the space, and I've had a lot of people give me different answers of what they really think digital ownership is. Me and my brother often speak about the idea of, I think it was maybe 2 years ago when people first really started to fly the flag of digital ownership. If the studio shuts down, you're still going
Oh
to own
man.
this asset. And well, first you kind of got to point out, yeah, but that asset isn't actually the thing on the blockchain. And then secondly, if the studio is shut down, cool, you own an asset for something that doesn't exist anymore. And one of the more kind of positive, I guess, ways I've looked at ownership, or I've had people that have discussed it with me, is the idea of it's not just the ownership of you've spent money and now you own this thing, because you could do that already in traditional gaming back when they were still boxing up games, which I know they really don't do too much now anyway, and we are essentially just renting all our games from Steam. But it was more the idea of yes, you've bought into this thing, but it's kind of the ownership that you're part of the Web3 project that you're taking part in as well, due to the early states we see these things in. So when you're talking about the digital ownership people get, what does that actually mean to you compared to some of the people that just use it as the buzzword and they've been invited to a Twitter space and they don't actually know too much
Yeah,
about
this is
gaming?
my number one favorite question and thing to talk about in all of Web3 and even in our game that we're building. So like I could probably talk about this for 2 hours, but I promise not to do that. But I went through the same kind of progression that you did. Everybody's like, "Oh, ownership. If the studio shuts down, you still have your sword." And I'm like, "You can't swing it. What does it matter?" Like, and then the next thing was interoperability, right? You could take that sword and bring it into another game, right? And come on. And now, like as a game developer, I can tell you, we don't want to take someone else's sword and their economy, maybe the art. Like maybe they have a really cool looking sword and it's got some neat effects on it, but like the function, the economy, and everything around it, like we want to make our own game. Nobody wants to take someone else's game and do that. So that's not even the interoperability story was also pretty flawed. In addition to the studio can shut down and you still got it. So I look at ownership as, and I think if you ask a lot of people in Web3 gaming, like, what does it mean? They're like, but you can own your stuff. You're like, but what does that mean? And you keep pressing them on it. They will eventually break
Yeah.
down to a point where it's just like, well, you can sell it. You could profit from it. It could be worth a lot. And hey, all that time you spent, into the game, you can recoup some of that financially. Like it all comes down to selling it, which is one of the prongs of ownership. It's also there in physical items, and it's good, don't get me wrong, but I don't think that's what we need on the back of the box. The thing that excites me are all the other prongs of ownership, and I'll give you some examples, right? So in physical collectibles, do I have it here? I don't think I have it in this room. I have a guitar pick. There's a little P on the corner, and I
Yeah.
could show it to you, and you'd be like, cool guitar pick,
Cool.
bro. And I'm like, wait a minute. There's a story here. See that little P? Yeah. Well, that's the logo for this band in the United States that was called the Presidents of the United States of America. They're like a pop band for a while. They had good songs. They have a song called Peaches. You can look up. Anyways, their last concert in Seattle was where I live. Was at the Showbox, was this place near me, and I was there and I listened to their last song. And at the end, he flicks his guitar pick out and I got it and like picked it up off the floor. And I'm
Yeah.
like, no way. The last song by the band. I have this. I'm never going to sell it. And I tell that story and people are like, that's so cool. It looks like a normal guitar pick, but it's actually got all that
Yeah. Yeah.
emotional connection, right? This is what we need in our digital items, right? We need digital items with stories, and you can't just tell the story. You need the items to tell the story and record the
Yeah.
story and the moments to be there for those items as you pour your heart and soul into them, or somebody else poured their heart and soul into them. You need more than the price provenance of who paid what for the item to travel with the item, and for that to be a forever thing that you don't ever want to
Mm.
give up, or maybe you do want to give it up because now it's gone to the moon in value. So
Yeah.
it's the experience of ownership, and with things like stories that are on items, things you couldn't do without owning your items. So
Mm.
two examples from our game that we're building right now that we've talked about, so I can say this, is we have card wagering. That's kind of a no-brainer. Like, yeah, in order to wager
Yeah.
this to where I could lose it and you can gain it, I have to own this because I'm going to transfer
Yeah.
ownership
Yeah.
to
Yeah.
you. That's kind of an easy one, like a layup. But the one that I don't see enough people talking about are the stories. So in our
Mm.
game, it's a trading card game. And when you
Yeah. Yeah.
have the item on chain, which we're not going to the Web2 market, we're not going to call it on chain, but everybody will know, oh, it's on chain. I know what that means if you're Web3 native.
It's on a
Yeah, well, we
database
we
or
call the
something like
process to
that.
do that grading, like getting your card graded. So
Oh,
in
okay.
in in
Okay. Yeah. Yeah.
traditional physicals, you get your card graded when it's really rare and you want to see what it's worth. In
Hmm.
our game, you get it graded for similar reasons, but that also puts it on chain. And you don't have to do that.
Yeah.
You can play the game and enjoy the game without anything on chain. But if you do and you grade it and you get it on chain, this is where not only can you wager it, but you will also start the card will start collecting stories. So you win
Hmm.
matches with it. It records that onto the actual card itself on the blockchain. If you have a match that's particularly awesome to you? Like it was a match and you played against the number one player in the world and you actually beat him because you got lucky on the last turn. And you're like, oh my
Mhm.
God, you have to see this game where I beat like Lambie series. It's insane. And I did it with these cards. Well, all of those cards, if they were on chain, would record that match. And the entire playback of that match with all the animations and all the effects would be reconstructable from the data that we put on that card. Kind of like this
Mm.
is a geeky thing, but in Hearthstone they have this thing called HS Replay, and you can watch. Like Hearthstone doesn't have a way to
Yeah.
share games unless you're recording the game yourself, like if you're a live
Hmm.
streamer. So we're gonna have
Yeah.
games recorded to the items themselves, right? And you can reconstruct the entire game from very little data and it will be on chain forever. And that is something that if the studio shuts down, can still be with you because you can have a viewer for that game and you'll be able to watch the game in
Mm.
all of its glory where you beat, the number one player in the world. And are you going to be quick to rush out and go sell that thing? I mean, maybe if it's gone up in value because you're a pro, but you might be like, I'm gonna keep that because I want to remember that story and show my friends, you know, that moment. Like, watch this game, guys. Like, here, click this link. They don't even have to have the game installed. So it's things like that that bring that emotional connection in the stories. These are just two examples, and wagering your cards of experiential ownership that you really couldn't do if you didn't own your items. And we're trying to light this up in ways that get people excited and they say, yeah, I want to own my stuff now. Like I didn't know what you meant. I just, I thought it was all about finance and making money, but there are other reasons to do that.
100%, man. Like, I would completely agree. You've given me a good setup for my next question, but before I go on to that, the thing you've just described there has been the thing since maybe a year and a half ago that I've always talked about as something that I want to see from the point of blockchain and having an item in a game. And I remember the first time I heard a project tell me about it. I'm really sorry to the project if you still exist, but I have forgotten your name. The guy told me the story of the sword in the stone, right? And you pull out the sword, and then that is recorded on the blockchain. You've pulled out this sword. This sword then goes and defeats this monster in this dungeon. It then defeats the first mythic dungeon. That, and it has what I always call it is the legacy data behind the item. So to hear that that's what you're putting in your game, that's the main thing I like blockchain to be used for outside of the classic skin sales. Cool, yeah, I think blockchain's a good idea for cosmetics in general, but to use it in a more novel way that I don't see people using, having the legacy history of everything that item has done up until the point it comes to you, I think is truly fascinating, especially if you say you beat the number one ranked player and you do eventually sell that because either it moons or whatever. Then you've got a fan out there that is going to be over the moon. He's going to be like, not only did this thing beat the number one player, this is also Kevin's card. I bought Kevin's card from the time he beat that number one player. And it really does kind of help propel some of these non-physical items into the realm of collectors and the type of stuff people would be looking forward to if they're trying to make a collection. So that's enough praising you for how awesome that is. My next is kind of down a negative slightly, and I completely agree with you around the idea of interoperability that I'm so grateful it hasn't been a buzzword on Spaces more recently. A while ago, it was what everyone was talking about a lot. And I would always say this, but I've never been in the position you've been in, where you've been in studios in the traditional world, you've been building in the traditional world. I have always said that interoperability just won't work because it can happen in traditional games. They just choose not to do it because, like you mentioned, there's no benefit to them to take someone else's product and try and either build their game around it or build it into their game. I don't see why a studio would use their resources to do that. But it kind of makes me think of the idea of you've worked in both sides of the industry now, traditional and Web3, and people always speak kind of almost a positive to a toxic amount of how close and all ships rise together in Web3. Do you think there is some semblance of truth to that in the way that projects do work together with each other in this space? Initially under the guise of interoperability, which could be anything, you're just working with two projects together, or do you think there is still the your game is your game. You might do some small stuff with other people, but if it's really going to be mass adoption, a game is going to be a game confined to its own self or even its own ecosystem type thing.
Yeah, I think the idea there is that the exchange of value can be really cool, right? It's kind of like being on Amazon and seeing like if you like this, you might also like this, or people who bought your thing are also buying this thing, and it's just a way. It's kind of an interesting user acquisition funnel. You're like, hey, who might like our game? You know who might like our game? The guys who are playing that other Web3 game that we're friends with. You know, we're similar but different. Like you should try our game, and we'll send our players to your game, and you do an exchange like that. And although one lens of that is could be cannibalistic, like why would you ever send someone to a competitor's game? But you know, if there's a nice bi-directional flow there, then you know it
Mhm.
doesn't have to be seen as a vampire attack or a cannibalistic practice. But you're
Mm.
like, hey, let's give those holders some value in our game. Like let's not take the items exactly as they are over there, but let's give them some perks over in our world as a neat
Mhm.
user acquisition funnel, and let's do the same the other direction. Like those are going to be the best versions of that. And of course there will be people who are like, let's vampire attack all the doodles holders and like just try to get them out of whatever they're doing and over into our game because they're wrecked, right? But I don't know. I'm more optimistic and positive about that, and I do think that the rising tide, raises all ships, is going to be the case for quite a while until Web3 is very established. So we have a long time before it
Mhm.
gets more cutthroat, and we won't even you don't even talk to us with an offer for a collaboration. Like we're all trying to, like we're all on the same team right now because we haven't made it yet, and the WAGMI
Yeah.
meme, I don't think that exists in retail because it's actually PvP. But
Yeah.
the optimistic side of me does like to believe that exists as builders. Like we can all make it together if we work together. And that may not be the case 10 years from now, but it is for the foreseeable future. And I'm happy to embrace that.
Yeah, I kind of like the way you're phrasing that. I think I've heard very rarely phrased similarly, and it's the idea that like we're all ships rise together in the space we're in now because it's currently all of us trying to convince everybody else that this is good. Once they are convinced, perhaps it's not going to be all the ships together, and that's where it's going to start moving
Yeah.
off from then. But for the moment, because it's kind of like the common, it's not, I want to say common enemy, but traditional gamers aren't the enemy. They're the people we want to be playing with us. I just have no other turn of phrase that would fit it quite so well, or a common goal, an alliance through wanting to get to the same position. So thinking back on what we've talked off so far and the progression you've had through, and you've touched on your game a little bit, but let's try and talk a little bit more about what your game is actually doing. And you said it's going to be a trading card game. What made you decide to go with this type of game, and was that always the plan? I know you mentioned early on that you got into this studio and it already existed before you, and this was already 3 years ago, and you've had 3 years going through this now. For instance, I know that Cam over at Fableborn, I think they axed like 7 different variants of their game or something before the one we see now. So is the game we're finally going to be seeing from you guys the game you thought you were going to make, or is it the game you have ended up making?
Similar story, although we don't have seven heads on pikes behind us like Cam does, but we do have one. We do have one.
Okay.
So it's funny, when I got into Web3 and I'm like, okay, we're gonna make a Web3 game. Sweet, what are we making? Um, there were some obvious no-brainers that are just perfect fits for Web3, and that is, a trading card game because of the ownership. Loot extraction shooter is a no-brainer. MMO is another really good one, and then a cozy game like Animal Crossing. Those were the four that I'm like, well, these are obvious, and like everybody's starting to go off and build those. And so I'm like, well, let's do something adjacent to those. So our first attempt was to make an auto battler game, like, taking the magic of a game like Teamfight Tactics or Dota, which is a really hardcore, really complex, really niche game that, a small amount of people love to death, and try to bring
Yeah.
that to like make it more accessible. Like that's what I love to do, is like take
Hmm.
complex things and make it to where like your grandma can understand it. I think working on solitaire for
Yeah.
12 years helped me figure out how to do that. So, we wanted, hey, what if we made TFT for everybody, like 100 million users? What would that look like? And so we set off to do that and have ownership and everything. And one of our product pillars was that the game had to be fun to watch and it had to be easy to pick up and
Hmm.
learn. And so we started building that, and the product that we ended up with after like 7 or 8 months was starting to look like Supercell had a prototype of a game that actually got into beta called Clash Mini. It was a little
Hmm.
miniature, simple game where you put guys on the board and you let them fight in this little tiny board. And it was starting to look and feel like that. And we saw Clash Mini and we're like, hey, they're doing the same kind of thing. We're on the right track. Like if Supercell's going
Yeah.
after it, there's something here, right? And as the game was starting to come online and we were getting demos in our engine, it just was not hitting that goal for me. It was not easy to watch. There was too much going on. If you've ever seen TFT or those kind of auto battler
Yeah.
games, it's just like take my turn, and combat. Blah! And like all this crap happens, and if you're not a master of that game, it's really hard to digest. And we
Yeah.
tried to like make that digestible and simplify it, but it was still so much going on, and it was just falling a little bit short of our, like, it has to be easy to learn and then hard to master and fun to watch. Like it just wasn't nailing that. So we're like, man, maybe we just need to blend more TCG, into this and still have a little bit
Yeah.
of what makes auto battlers great, like the simultaneous turns, the great pacing, the let's see what he does next turn, a little bit of that with the fast paced of it. But you know, we needed to go a little more fun to watch, easy to digest, better for first time users. And so that's when we blended in more TCG and we went hardcore TCG, but we left a little bit of the inspiration of auto battlers in there. So the game that you're seeing now is our second iteration after our auto battler for everybody couldn't quite get over the hump. And it's funny because we realized it a year before they canceled Clash Mini. We're like, I think they're gonna realize they're in trouble. And then when they canceled it, we were like, there it is. We knew, we saw that
They
coming.
realized.
Yeah, it's sad though. I really wanted to see that game succeed. They couldn't figure it out though.
Hmm.
They ran
Yeah.
into the same problems we did, and I'm like, these problems are hard. They're really tough.
That's great. I love the way you're speaking about this as well, and it's something I've not heard a lot of people behind the game say. Obviously, I'm someone that does a lot of video work, as in I do streaming, I make videos, I do stuff like this where I'm just talking. It's always got to be fun for someone to watch, right? I get given some of these games in Web3. Some of them are not fun to play and not fun to watch. But then there's others that I really enjoy playing, but I can see that no one wants to watch me play it. And I think that's something that is possible for a game to live on, but in the time we're in now, where UGC is such a massive part of free marketing for a game, I think people that are really not focusing on making sure anyone can get into this and anyone can watch this is going to instantly broaden the people that are going to have interest in your product. I personally have played I played League of Legends from season 2 up until season 9 when I stopped. I'm recently back in. You know you can never kick that monkey. I'm recently back in, but only playing ARAMs. But at season 7, I switched to playing Dota 2 as well as League of Legends. So I can now watch both. I watch both of the World Series for the League of Legends, and I watch TI for Dota 2. I can watch both of them. My friends that have only played League of Legends, they cannot watch Dota because they can't understand all the extra intricacies that are there. But my friends that have played Dota 2, they can easily watch League of Legends because it's a simplified version. So if other people are starting to make a game now, do you think this is things that people need to be taking into more of a consideration, looking at the landscape of games that we have available to us now, or potentially ones you have seen that are going to be coming out in the future?
I mean, it depends on the goals of the game. You know, the way I see it, it's such when you have a game that's not only fun to play, but also fun to watch, you have this amazing virtuous cycle where you're like, well, people find your game because it's cool and it's fun to watch, and then streamers want to stream your game because they can get viewers, right? And that's what streamer like that's the best thing in the world for streamers. Like, man, can I just get a game that I love that also gets me viewers? Like, I hate having to choose a game I love or the game that gets viewers. Like, that's a crappy decision for them to have to
Yeah.
make. So if you can have a game that's fun to watch, streamers are going to love you. They're going to stream. That will get more viewers. That will get you more players. Like, it's this incredible cycle. So why, like, I don't understand why you wouldn't want to do that. But it also makes the game more accessible. Like, it's just, people love watching games today, like people like watching TV, and still do. So, and I think a lot of people
Yeah.
don't understand that. You're like, why would you watch a game? Like that seems like such a waste of a time. Like, the older generation would be like, oh, what a waste of time. Like
Mm.
that's even worse than playing games all day is watching someone else play them. But us gamers, the true DNA of gamers, we love to play, we love to watch for many reasons, like to get better because it's entertaining, you learn things, you laugh, the streamers are charismatic, whatever it is. And
Yeah.
so, when you have the game must be fun to watch product goal, you end up putting features in the game sometimes more for the viewers than for the players.
Mm.
But what's funny about that is that when you do that, it actually turns out good for the players as well. Because like imagine, this fun to watch experience, and now you're the opponent just playing this guy, and you're seeing this feature, and you're like,
Mm.
okay, I see what's going on. This is kind of neat. Like it's good for you too, and like it just makes the game more accessible. So it's a win-win. And I don't understand why there aren't more Web3 game studio founders talking about that. Like there's only two of them, like myself and Paul Bettner, who really talk up. There are probably more, right? I'm
Yeah.
not meaning to say we're the only two people doing this, but like there are only two people who like talk about it all the time. Like our game has to be fun to
Mm.
watch, and Paul is making a game called Wildcard. That game looks awesome.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Paul and I are very similar in our like user experience DNA, and the product has to be great. And we come from a long line of like game design background, and they're going after this goal
Yeah.
different than we are. They're like, let's bring in the crowd and make you a part of that, and sponsor
Mm.
teams and go esports. And we just want a game that everybody thinks is fun to watch, and so we're putting features in to try to achieve that.
I think I might petition for this to be the swap of the buzzwords in all the Twitter spaces. A game has to be fun to play. Yeah, obviously, guys, we don't need to say that anymore. How about we swap that out with it has to be fun to
That's
watch as
cool.
well? Because that would be a lot more useful for myself as a streamer, a lot more useful for myself as someone that does marketing, and basically way more useful to me in general if people are going to have fun watching it as well as playing it as well. And I would say you are definitely right. I believe I've heard Paul speak about this as well. And Wildcards is a fantastic game that I have had the chance to play and cover a bit as well. And I believe it did do well either this year or last year at our awards as well. So I am glad that you brought that up. We are actually running out of time today, but my final question I always like to ask everybody, and I might get an older answer from yourself through the history you've had, is what would you call your favorite game of all time?
Man, that's such a tough question. And it's like asking a movie buff, what's your favorite movie of all time? But I will answer. I will answer it because I hate there are too many to name. There are, and I play thousands of them, and I do have a lot of favorites. But my favorite game of all time would either have to be The Secret of Mana on the Super Nintendo Entertainment System, because it was so ahead of its time. This was an action RPG that you could just hop in a second controller and take control of the AI, and now your buddy's playing with you on the couch. Pop out the controller, and then the AI takes it back over again. By today's standards, that is still amazing.
Yeah,
And then the Zelda series has always
yeah.
touched, been a close one to my heart.
Which would you say is your
Oh,
favorite
Link to the
Zelda?
Past. Come on, it's like the only Zelda that really I've played all of them, but that's the one that it's seen. it's agreed upon as the best Zelda. There are a few crazy people who will say Majora's Mask, but it's a link to the past.
I was about to say
Yeah, it's
Majora's
fine. That was
Mask.
unique, very unique. And they're all good. They're all good. Maybe the CDI version, if you ever got your hands on that, was like a little cringe. But A Link to the Past is the best one. Yeah, for sure.
I remember the one of the Zelda ones, I can't even remember what it was called, but it was the one that was kind of fully animated in a Winnie the Pooh-esque kind of style, and Link would move like this and Zelda would be moving all weird and stuff, and I've watched it so many times when different streamers have picked it up to play it just to see their minds blown that it existed and it was a real game. I hope all of you enjoyed this episode today, and it was wonderful to have Kevin to join us. Don't forget you can see this on YouTube and all possible podcast locations. If you have an idea of anyone you want to come on the episode with us next, leave that in the comments. As from me and Kevin, thank you very much, Koin, and goodbye.
Thank you.